Reverse mortgages, maybe because of marketing, maybe because of lack of other products or other creative mortgage people trying to find ways to help seniors in ways other than reverse mortgages, they've kind of become the default because people don't know any better. They think senior mortgage, reverse mortgage, or sell your home. And it seems like people don't really know that there are other alternatives, which is why we're here, is to raise awareness about the other options.
What if your next move-in was only stalled by misinformation? Today's guest has created innovative lending tools that are helping families say yes and saving them millions in the process.
Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights. And with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
Welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast that dives deep into the senior living and senior care industries, bringing you insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront of innovation, leadership, and care. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. For those of you who don't know about us, CCR Growth is a full-service marketing and growth agency exclusive to the senior living industry. And through this podcast, I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of senior care, exploring the innovations, strategies, and leadership insights that are shaping the future of the industry. So whether you're a provider, a caregiver, or industry leader, this show is here to help you make informed decisions and create meaningful impact. So today's guest is Mark Maimon, Senior Vice President at Luminate Bank and the founder of Maimon Mortgage Team. Over the past 2 decades, Mark has closed over $2 billion in loans, but what truly sets him apart is his mission. He's disrupting the senior lending space by helping families access capital without selling their homes, leveraging creative tools like trust loans, bridge loans, and equity lines that cater to the realities of aging. He's also the host of the On the Mark podcast, which I love, where he educates families and professionals alike about smarter, more compassionate lending. So welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you, Jerry. It's great to be here.
This is a very interesting topic. I think there's a lot of question marks for people when it comes to the financial side of senior living and how to access, the right level of care that somebody might need. So I want to just first talk about why this work matters. And what do you think is broken about how most families are advised to pay for senior care today?
I think it's primarily who's advising them and what their qualifications are, and families not seeking out proper advice from all the professionals that should be weighing into these decisions. So in my opinion, it should be a financial advisor, should be an estate attorney, a tax accountant or advisor, along with potentially a real estate agent, the resources that the community may have. So it's really kind of all hands on deck. But oftentimes what happens is the family is relying on one person for advice, and that person may have a specific specialty that doesn't encompass all the other aspects of it. So just getting the proper advice and having the right financial team around you is really, really important with these big decisions.
Not getting your advice from Uncle Jim.
Yeah. Everyone has an Uncle Jim.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't always listen to him if he's living in a trailer.
No, definitely not.
Right.
One thing that I've seen for years, maybe not so much now, but in the past was all about reverse mortgages. There's all those ads on TV. You see it constantly plastered everywhere, and that kind of became the default. What is the risk in that?
Well, it's one product that may be a good fit for certain situations, but not others. So for example, if you work at a community and you want that person to move into whatever it is, assisted living, memory care, a reverse mortgage isn't an option because they have a requirement that you have to continue living in the home in order to maintain that loan. So there are actually a lot of things that kind of exclude people, but reverse mortgages, maybe because of marketing, maybe because of lack of other products or other creative mortgage people trying to find ways to help seniors in ways other than reverse mortgages, they've kind of become the default because people don't know any better. They think senior mortgage, reverse mortgage, or sell your home. And it seems like people don't really know that there are other alternatives, which is why we're here, is to raise awareness about the other options.
You told me last time we spoke about how selling your home could cost you millions. Can you share an example?
I can, yes. So we had a placement advisor who called us. We had a meeting with her about opportunities working together. And she said, God, I wish I had met you 3 months ago. Her client who was 97 years old, had bought her home 50 years prior for $15,000. It's in Orange County, California, so you can imagine the property values have gone up quite a bit over 50 years. She sold her home to pay for care. She was 97, probably needed, let's be generous, maybe 3 years worth of care. Sold her home and ended up writing about $1 million check to the IRS for taxes, for capital gains tax. So had she financed that transaction and the need for the money to pay for care rather than selling the home, that $1 million, or at least the majority of it, then would have gone to her family and her heirs. I mean, could have paid for kids and grandkids and great great grandkids education for years and years and years, but instead it went to the IRS. So understanding, that's what we were talking about, having all the right advisors. This family had a real estate agent who was advising them, and they called the real estate agent to sell the home, and the agent did their job. But they may not have been aware that they were selling the home at a time where the senior was going to be subject to a maximum of capital gains tax, and that's what they did. But they talked earlier about having the right financial team around you. Had that family engaged with an estate attorney, they would have called this out immediately. Had they called us, we would have called that out immediately. But they could have financed their way through it and probably walked away with the vast majority of those funds that are now in the IRS's hands and not coming back. So those are the types of things that kind of motivate us to continue to get the word out about, how to approach these types of situations, to engage the right advisors, what loan options there might be rather than selling the home, or at least delaying the sale of the home until after the senior passes, where if this family had done that, the capital gains tax would have been pretty much completely wiped out.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of families, they see the cost of the entry fees, and their first go-to is always to sell their home. I know, that's obviously where kind of the reverse mortgage concept came from. What are the other key products that your team offers that solve that move-in affordability crisis?
Yeah, so it's just different ways to be able to pull equity out of a home that eliminate some of the disqualifiers for reverse mortgages, but also just provide, in my opinion, sometimes a better solution. So some of them are equity lines of credit, where if somebody wants access to funds but doesn't necessarily need all of them right away, we can do those. And all these programs have unique qualification criteria, because if you try to just do a regular loan for a senior, the problem that you'll constantly run into is that traditional underwriting is very much driven by income. So seniors obviously aren't they're not starting a new business or running a side hustle out of a second bedroom. They're past those days, so their income is usually limited. So the products that we have are really designed to focus on other parts of their financial profile, or the amount of equity that they have in the home, and other criteria to be able to help them actually get approved. Because if you don't have these types of underwriting guidelines and you just try to put them through the standard criteria, they're oftentimes going to fail and get declined. And we have lots of situations where that's happened before. But the products range anywhere from equity lines of credit. There could be bridge loans for short-term needs, like for seniors who maybe, need money to fix up their home before they sell it, if that's what they're choosing to do, or if they need to pay for an entry fee at a CCRC type of community, or need short-term financing. Bridge loans are a great solution. And then there are others that will allow them to cash out equity from the home, use that money to pay for the mortgage and the care that they need, but be able to qualify without having to document employment or income. So there's a lot of different variations of it. They all have their own benefits and drawbacks, and our goal is to try to help the family find the one that meets their needs the best. And a reverse mortgage is one of those many options, but again, a lot of times people just automatically default to a reverse mortgage without knowing that there's other alternatives. So that's where we can come in handy for those families.
Is there something specific in your underwriting process too that caters to older adults?
There are, yeah, and there's different niches depending on the program. So the one I mentioned, where you don't have to disclose employment or income, it eliminates the income issue that seniors often have. And you can pull out a pretty good percentage of the equity of your home, which is one of the downsides of a reverse mortgage. They'll usually only let you leverage around half of the value of the home. So if you already have a mortgage, or your home is not tremendously valuable, you might not get out enough to actually pay for your longer term care needs. There are some, like one of our HELOC products allows us to look at any retirement assets that the senior has in their name, and we convert those assets into additional income. So we had a situation recently where we did that, where a senior had been denied for 3 other equity line applications and really did not want to do a reverse mortgage because she already had a mortgage at 3%. Reverse mortgages right now, as of the time of this recording, are, in the 9-10% range. So her financial advisor, fortunately, she had a good one, didn't want to convert that. But because we were converting the IRA money that she had in an account into additional income, it allowed her to qualify for the line of credit that she had been denied for elsewhere. So it's little niches and programs, and we work with a lot of different lending sources that all have different solutions that can be applied to the needs of seniors. And that's where, we are the experts in trying to figure out how to navigate it based on the individual senior's profile. And then there's also options where a family member might be willing and able to co-sign, where we can use the adult child, for example, as a co-signer on the loan to be able to help them tap into some of the equity in their home as well. So there's lots of different solutions. Family dynamics play in, financial means play in, credit score may play in, and sometimes seniors aren't, if they're having memory issues, haven't been great about keeping up with their bills. So there are lots of different factors that we look at to try to determine which one is actually the right fit. But the good news is that we have lots of different solutions that we can kind of pick and choose and match the client profile, the senior profile, to the right type of loan for what they're looking to do.
And I'm assuming you work with senior living providers specifically within the sales process of that.
We do.
If their goal is to get people to move in, they're going to try to help them get their assets together so they can make that happen. How does that work if a provider comes to you?
Yeah, so we do. We work with a lot of them, as well as relocation companies that support, the process of moving into a new community. And the main benefit to the community is obviously they're trying to raise occupancy. And imagine you have a senior who's coming to you, but they have these reservations. I don't want to sell my house. Let's say it's assisted living. I don't know if I'm going to like it. I want to keep the option to keep my home, but if I don't sell it, I don't know how I'm going to pay for care. Right. So that person now becomes someone who's interested in your community, but may not move in because of financial constraints or issues, or just wanting to leave their options open. So the idea is that you turn a maybe into a yes, right? And you raise that occupancy, you raise the percentage of likelihood that that senior and their family are going to agree to move in, because maybe you're providing a different solution and changing the narrative of sell your home so that you can move in to maybe, well, keep your home so you have an option. Obviously, we think you're going to love the community, you're going to want to stay here forever, and maybe you sell your home later, but it lowers the stress level for seniors and their families who are already going through a major transition. So to try to force them in quotes to sell their home at the same time, it's a really stressful part of that process. So we try to eliminate that so that we turn more maybes into yeses, and then obviously raise the occupancy from there.
I would imagine there's not a whole lot of operators out there doing this. I'm sure grand scale, there's probably a lot, but in a specific area, I feel like this is a competitive advantage that one community might have.
It certainly is. Yes, it certainly is. And it's changing the narrative. I know I said that earlier, but it really is. It's the other, you went and met with another community, they're saying, well, sell your home. But they're not maybe thinking along the lines of, well, there's capital gains tax implications. There's the implication of not being able to move back. If you try assisted living, for example, and you don't, it's not for you for some reason, or maybe you have decided you want to stay at home now. It takes away those options. And with seniors, oftentimes, especially the aging population now, which I consider to be kind of like a buy and hold, slow and steady type of generation, they don't want a lot of changes. And it's also because it's so stressful, they don't want to be forced to make a bunch of big decisions all at once. Like if they can take it in bits and pieces, then again, they may say yes to a community and moving in. Whereas if they have to do all of that, they have to sell their home, not only will it potentially delay the timing at which they can move in, but it just causes a lot more stress and may make them say, you know what, this is just too overwhelming. I'm just going to stay home. And then you don't get that unit rented. And that's where the occupancy can fall off. But I agree, it could be an absolutely competitive advantage. And we've seen some communities actually offer incentives to the senior and their family to say, well, there's costs associated with bridge loans, for example. Maybe what we'll do is we'll give you half a month of rent as a credit, and that helps offset some of the costs associated with bridge financings. Sometimes communities are getting creative, especially when they have a lot of units, or if it's a new community that's just been built and they need to fill a bunch of rooms and units. Sometimes that's a creative strategy that they can use to get people, again, to put in those deposits, to be able to raise that occupancy at a faster pace than they would if they were relying on just conventional means of trying to attract people.
Well, I think that's really appealing too, because I know within the next decade or so, we have 13 to 14 million baby boomers exiting the housing market. And you've got so many developers right now are building these luxury retirement communities, but there's this entire middle market that's going to have to come up with a solution. And I think taking the equity out of their home to pay for their long-term care needs is going to be the way to go.
Yes.
Having solutions like this makes the most sense.
It does. And also, if you look at the population that's aging now, like I said before, it's a buy and hold generation. Many of them have owned their homes for 30, 40, 50 years, and they've stayed there, which also means they're probably not in great condition to be sold, right? Unless they've done a renovation really recently, which the stereotype is that, there's still green carpets and yellow walls and things that are not going to be appealing when you go to sell a home. And the products that we have can be used to actually pay for those renovations to try to sell the home for more money. So there's a lot of creativity here. I think when communities engage with us and they really understand and see the challenges that seniors and their families are going through and how this could just relieve stress. I think stress relief is a big deal in the sales cycle, in my opinion, and taking away that lever of having to sell your home to move in here, that's a barrier of entry, and a big one, a significant one.
It's huge.
Yeah. So I agree with you that that this is probably the wave of the future, and people have so much equity in their home. I don't remember the exact statistic, but we're at a point in time where people have never had more equity in their homes across the country. And we're coming off of a fairly sharp rise in property values. But again, these seniors have owned their homes for decades, so they've benefited from that equity. Now it's just a matter of putting that to use in a creative way to be able to age the way that you want to age, and also not to shortchange yourself on the level of care that you think you need, or the type of community that you want to move into. If it's a little more expensive, but you have the equity to pull on from your home, you can't say, I quote unquote can't afford the extra whatever $2,000 a month for this community versus the other community. When you're sitting in a house that has $1 million, $2 million of equity, there is a way to make that happen for people. It's just, you just have to know the tools, and the communities need to know the right questions to ask to just identify those opportunities. And then obviously we can engage with them to help the families figure out exactly what that would look like. But that's the communities that we see being most successful with us, are asking questions about, when someone says, I can't afford this. Well, okay, we understand. Do you have a home? That's a great first question, because in many cases the answer will be yes. And then if you have equity in the home, many times again, yes. So it's just a matter of kind of slowly but surely leading them down the path to understand that this is a potential option, and then referring them to a mortgage team that is qualified to have these conversations with them and help them understand all the implications of different ways that they could approach it.
I definitely see the value bringing this into the sales process. And then what's the advantage bringing you into that sales process earlier? What does that do for the community?
I feel like when, the move into a community is an emotional roller coaster, right? First, you get to the point where you think you might need to be somewhere else other than home. Maybe home isn't safe anymore, or, your level of care needs are higher. As you get further into that thought process, if you're starting to build resistance and all these thoughts are building in your head about why, and I'm putting myself in the seniors' shoes at the moment, starting to think, oh, this is stressful, this is getting more stressful. The longer you let that issue fester, and whether it be financial or emotional or whatever it may be, the harder it is to break down those barriers. So in my opinion, if you get in with the family to have those conversations earlier on, you're going to not allow that emotional roller coaster to play out as long. So the earlier you can provide these types of options and solutions, they might say, I have a concern about the financials. Well, we have a potential solution. It's not, I'm worried about my money. I'm worried about my money. I've been dealing with this for 6, 12 months. No one's provided any solutions. Imagine you're the community that now says, hey, there are options. We have a relationship with a company that can help you navigate this. That can be a huge sigh of relief and again, a differentiator for those communities as opposed to others who will just allow that stress to grow and hope that the senior and their family will still say yes.
One thing that I see communities doing a lot too, they're either advancing funds or they're covering the entry fees internally. Why do you think providers should stop doing that, and what's the alternative?
Well, it's a drain on resources, on financial resources, because imagine you're a CCRC with just making it up here, a $500,000 entry fee, and you're doing that for 10 families, right? That's a lot of money. That's $5 million that you don't have access to do whatever you want to do. Maybe you're renovating part of the complex, or you want to invest in technology or something like that. You're giving the families this money, this beautiful gift, very generous of you, but maybe a little over generous because of what it actually keeps you from being able to do if the families were able to give you that money. So in my opinion, as the consumer, that's really your responsibility to find a way to pay for those things when the service is being provided, and when you need to pay for the care or the entry fee, whatever it may be. It shouldn't be on the community to front you that money, even though they do it sometimes because they, again, want the family to say yes and to move them into the community, get them settled. You're going to get your money eventually, but it can put a significant financial strain on the communities. And the more you do it, the worse it is. So, and how do you manage that? Do you only provide it to a certain number of families at any given time? Or, how do you manage for that cash flow of not having access to potentially millions of dollars that you're rightfully due? And because right now we're in an environment where the real estate market may be softening and turning into more of a buyer's market, homes are not selling as fast. So you're putting yourself at risk for a longer period of time for potentially a large sum of money. And what happens if, the senior passes and now all of a sudden the property's stuck in probate? Now you're talking months and months and months. But obviously the senior had already moved in. So it's just really tricky to provide those. It's very risky for the communities to be able to front that amount of money, even if it's just assisted living and they're providing, $10,000 a month for 3 months, still $30,000 that you don't have to pay your employees and pay for all the logistical materials that you need and food for the residents. It's still a lot of money. So I just think it's an unnecessary risk that communities need to take on. And in my opinion, the better solution is if you want to provide a financing option through a lender like us to be able to pull out that money from the equity of the home, then you eliminate that financial risk. And maybe if you feel it's necessary, you provide some sort of financial incentive where you help cover the cost of the financing to make it more palatable for the family. But that's a way to offset having to front $500,000, for example. That's a pretty easy trade-off if you're, maybe giving them $5,000 in credits versus having to front them $500,000. Seems like a pretty good deal to me.
Yeah. Have you ever seen I'm sure there's been instances where somebody's financed for an entry fee or to get into a community and then got the loan and then decided at the last minute that they didn't want to do it.
Right.
What happens in that situation?
So bridge loans are naturally designed to allow to be short-term financing. Usually by that point, the closing costs have been paid if somebody has actually closed on the loan. Now, there are options where you can get the approval for the loan, but not actually close on it until there's an immediate need for that money. So you can kind of mitigate that, although we don't want people to apply for loans that they don't intend to actually take, of course, because that's, a waste of their time and money. But you can do that in those circumstances where you're still a little unsure, you're still negotiating the final terms or something like that. But let's just say they've already closed on the loan, they've incurred some of the costs, which will be usually netted out of the loan itself. So they're not having to come out of pocket for that. Because they're designed to be short-term loans, you could immediately pay that loan off if you choose to. Or you could keep the money and invest it and have it help you generate, interest income or whatever, depending on what you invested in, where it might be growing at a faster pace of what the mortgage is actually costing you. Because not all of our loans have to be short term. Some of them could be theoretically carried for 30 years. So if we know that a family is still a little unsure and they're either going to put that money toward an entry fee, or if they don't end up moving into a community, then they might just keep the money invested so it grows over time and allows them to pay for care over a longer period of time because they've now tapped into the equity of their home to be able to do that. You could kind of use those funds for either one.
I know a lot of families too, they wait too long to explore financing as an option. Do you think that's just lack of education, exposure to those options, or is it something else? And what are the consequences when they delay like that?
Yeah, I think it's financial paralysis or emotional paralysis where they're not literally paralyzed, but they're just kind of frozen because they don't know what to do and no one's really clearly able to outline it because there's, again, so many different professionals that we think should be involved. So that takes a little bit of time. But when people don't prepare, what sometimes happens is their medical condition deteriorates to the point where they may have less options to choose from, specifically because maybe they have now entered to a level of care where they're not physically able to sign on their own behalf. That usually negates some of the more conventional options that we try to place people in because the terms are better. So if you wait too long and your physical and mental capacities diminish, that can affect what loans you would be eligible for, and generally means that you're going to not have as good of options as you would otherwise. So that's why I always say start early. If you're not sure you need the money right away, that would be an argument for like a line of credit type of product where you have access to the equity, but you're not actually paying interest until you actually borrow the money. So that's why, again, different solutions for different situations. If you wait too long, you may negate your ability to get a certain type of loan that will be far more beneficial for you than other options that might be available once your condition deteriorates.
Families too, they often don't feel confident. They want to feel confident and not guilty about using equity for care.
Well, the families look at the real estate and they say, that's going to be mine when the family member passes away.
When mom and dad passes away. Yeah.
That's my inheritance. But,
exactly.
And that's where the family dynamics can play in. But it's tricky because sometimes people feel very strongly about that. Well, don't touch the house. That's mine. I don't want a loan on it, when you're not around anymore. But the reality is that the senior still needs to pay for care, and that may be their primary means of being able to do that. So what are your alternatives? You're going to put the senior in a basement unit with no windows, or are you going to use the home for care so that they can live comfortably through their final days? But the family dynamics there are definitely a factor. So what we often tell people, and we see this play out often, is that people look at real estate as completely different. They don't look at it as an investment like they do an IRA or other type of investment account. Even though your home, even though it is your home, it's where you live, it's still an investment. And it can be used in a strategic way, whether you're a senior or otherwise, to be honest, where you pull the equity to pay for certain things or to build your real estate empire if you're looking to buy real estate for investment purposes. There's lots of different things you can do with it. But it is an investment just like an IRA or other type of account. Sometimes it's people's most significant investment. So if you pull out a little bit of the equity and you have to take a loan in order to do that, to be able to pay for the care, to be able to do things that I guarantee you the adult child who's jockeying for position on that home certainly probably doesn't want to pay out of pocket for the shortfall for their parents, right? It doesn't sound like those align with each other if they're jockeying for position on the property, but then they're probably not going to want to pay, out of their own pockets. So it's a paradigm shift. Again, it's a matter of changing the narrative and making people think outside of the box a little bit to understand that real estate is an investment just like any other type of investment. And there are ways to tap into it to be able to use that as potentially a better alternative than turning to the family members to all chip in to be able to help pay for the care. The care needs are going to be there, regardless. You've got to find a way to pay for it. Yes, you can still inherit the home, but this is, again, one of the areas where reverse mortgage may not be a good choice if you want to hand that home down to your family, because that reverse mortgage has to get paid off if the senior either passes away or moves out of the home. So that family member who may be taking over the property may not be in a position to qualify for their own mortgage, and therefore they would be forced to sell the home. So some of our products can be handed down in the event of, an estate situation can be handed down where the heir to the property can assume the existing mortgage and continue paying it without having to qualify for a new loan. So again, these are the little nuances with the lending that we do to understand if a family wants to pass down that property, then we know almost for sure that a reverse mortgage is not the right solution. So that's where our knowledge and expertise comes in, very helpful for families in understanding the nuances, because little details like that make a huge difference in the family legacy planning of what they want to do with the home.
How do you think the senior living sales team can help with the family dynamics in that case too?
Well, it's not easy to navigate those strong feelings about what people are owed and maybe some, difficult interpersonal relationships between siblings where I should get more than you. And, I did this and I did that. So they're very difficult. My general advice is try to not get involved to a degree. But when it comes down to it, if they have a home and let's say that's going to be a shared asset between siblings that would inherit the home after the fact, it's just, again, changing the narrative and saying, listen, this is an investment. There are ways to pull equity out so that you don't have to physically pay out of pocket to pay for the care. Let's put mom or dad's needs first to be able to allow them. That investment in the real estate is their investment, not yours. It will be yours eventually, but right now it's theirs and they need it to pay for care. So it's just, I think the way you phrase it to families and getting them to look at, well, what's the alternative? If you don't leverage the home, where's the money going to come from for them to be able to age the way that you want them to age? Right? Is it going to come out of your pocket? Are you going to like that? Probably not. Maybe we should leverage the home as a means of being able to accomplish those goals.
Looking forward to, what do you think's the next frontier for financing senior living? What aren't we talking about yet that we should be?
Well, I think these alternative options to reverse mortgages are going to become more mainstream. That's my personal mission is, the story that I told you about the family that paid $1 million in taxes unnecessarily. That should never happen. That's a failure of education and resources. But I think obviously the aging population is growing and growing fast, right? We all know the silver tsunami and the baby boomers are coming and they're going to need care, and people are living for longer and the cost of care is rising. So you're going to need more and more and more money to be able to age the way that people want to age. But at the same time, the home has probably built up inequity at a fairly similar pace to the cost of care. So I think it's a matter of changing the narrative and continuing to just provide options to people. Financing your home is not going to be the right option for every person. It's just not. Some people have means beyond that they don't need to finance. Some people have an aversion to financing, whatever it may be. So it's not going to work for everybody, but I think just being able to provide more options to families so that they don't feel that stress of the move into senior living and also selling their home, or maybe they just need to move into senior living for like a handful of months to get a feel for it and then feel comfortable selling their home. Just reducing the stress level, I think, will play a big part in this, but there's going to be more and more and more of it. And so if we're looking at it from the community perspective, if you have more and more people interested in moving into your community, you want to say yes to as many of those people as you can. So if you're providing alternatives that your competitors are not even aware of or talking about with families, the senior and their families are going to come into your community with less stress on their shoulders and feeling more confident that there are options for them to consider, as opposed to just having it all just be a concern about, well, how are we going to pay for this? So limiting that stress, I think, can't be understated as to how valuable that is. as a benefit to the senior and their family in general. It's just a good thing to do, but also for the sales cycle to be able to encourage more families to feel comfortable saying yes. That's the ultimate goal for the communities.
I know we already talked about the one family that lost lost $1 million to the IRS. Is there a particular story that sticks out to you where financing actually helped change the outcome?
Yeah, there was. So we had a recent case. I think I touched on it briefly about a senior who was referred by a financial advisor. She needed access to about $250,000 of equity from her home. Obviously wasn't working anymore, had been denied by several lenders for HELOCs. And, had she gone into a reverse mortgage, she would have run out of money within probably 3-4 years. Right. And she was pretty healthy. So, she was in good shape. But the concern was just having access to the equity because she was feeling stressed about the fact that she was liquidating funds, right? That's what you do, right? You work, all your years of working are meant to build up the investments and everything and resources that you have. And then you retire, and then the air starts getting let out of the balloon and you start to deplete those funds. So it's very stressful to watch those funds depleting, and if they're depleting at a rapid pace, that accelerates the stress that you're having. So I think just having access to that $250,000 put her at ease to know that she now had a longer runway to be able to accommodate whatever life throws at her. And so those cases are really rewarding for us because, first of all, she had tried and failed with several other sources. A reverse mortgage for her made no sense whatsoever. Having a rate at 3% currently and exchanging that for 9%, tripling her interest on that money, and just having so many limited options with reverse mortgages and so many things that she did not want, her financial advisor did not want, being able to come through for that family was very rewarding. We do all types of mortgages, not just for seniors. But by far, this is the most rewarding work that we do because it literally changes people's last years on earth and the families and the legacies that they leave behind. And the advice we give could have a dramatic impact on how much money is left over to pay for kids' tuition, for their grandkids and great grandkids. I've been the beneficiary of my grandfather, who was an immigrant in the early 1900s and bought real estate that's still in the family. And it's now benefiting people that he never even met, people in our families. So I think real estate can be very powerful if it's used in the right way. And so that's really what drives our mission, to get the word out there. Most people don't know that these options exist. And I feel like it's my job in part to raise awareness. And that's why I appreciate you having me on today, is to expand the awareness of what's out there and what options are there for families to benefit everybody. This is a win-win-win for anyone involved, the communities, the seniors, their families, their legacy. I mean, all these things can be impacted with the right advice and the right advisors. If you have all those things in place, I think you're going to make really good financial decisions. And that's honestly what drives us to do what we do every day.
You're providing such peace of mind for everybody involved in that process too. I mean, you think about scams and theft that are targeting the elderly. $30 billion or something was lost in the last year alone to that.
Yes.
Being able to be in a space where you know you're doing good and a family can trust you with this process, that's got to be such a load off for them.
It is, yes. And trust is a big factor in lending in general, but especially when you're dealing with seniors and their families, there has to be a level of trust. You have to be patient. You have to go slow. You can't try to rush people into it, which is like the biggest complaint about mortgage people in general, that they're trying to sell you on something. Oh, sign on the dotted line. Let's lock your rate. Let's do this. Let's do that. So it has to be, in my opinion, if you're dealing with someone who does lending in the senior space, it has to be somebody who's patient, has to be somebody who's knowledgeable about all the different aspects of taxation, estate planning, do you have the property into trust? Like, all these things matter. But you have to have somebody who has a well-rounded knowledge of all those different components, because if you miss one, you might be giving bad advice when you think you're giving good advice. And so that's where my team and I really shine, is understanding all those components to how to advise a senior. And that's really what we pride ourselves on.
I mentioned the podcast at the top of the show. How has hosting your show on the Mark helped advance your mission?
Well, it's a platform to be able to raise awareness. So one of the beautiful things about podcasting and social media and whatnot is that it's social, right? So we broadcast it to our network of people that we know, but there's a lot of people we don't know, right? So we interview somebody, and now all of a sudden we're helping promote to our network and their network. So it's kind of like overlapping clusters, if you want to look at it that way, where now our message is getting amplified to the people within that person's network. And then maybe somebody in that network says, that's a pretty interesting concept. I'm going to share it with somebody else. So just the podcast itself can be shared. But what we usually do is we'll post stuff on social media that then can be physically shared very easily with a click of a button to other people that might have interest in it. And so it's been a great way for us to just get the word out there about these different products. Like I said, most people have no idea that these options are even there, including financial advisors and estate attorneys and people that work in the senior space. This has not been a commonly used tactic. That's why we're trying to change the narrative, why it's a big task ahead of us to do that and to raise awareness about something that people aren't really talking about or know about and aren't familiar with and comfortable with yet. But that's partly why we do the podcast, is to raise awareness. We interview thought leaders in different parts of senior living and beyond, and financial planning and, just financial literacy in general, because I enjoy talking about it. To be honest, I learn as much as I teach on these sessions, and I really enjoy it, and it makes me better at what I do. To interview other people who are focused on their aspect, whether it be an estate attorney or a tax accountant or somebody. I always learn something new on each of the sessions that we do, and it's an educational opportunity for me as well as the audience.
100%. I've spoken with so many leaders in this space now, and I learn something new every single time. It's been such a gift having this opportunity. My last question for you is, what has this work taught you about aging, about dignity, or about money?
A lot. That it's not all about the pursuit of wealth. It's about a lot of people are very driven by the legacy that they leave behind. And a lot of that is money. Thoughts around money is very much driven by your childhood and the era that you grew up in. And sometimes those barriers are very difficult to break down because they've been built up over and reinforced over so many years. But I think the key really is, again, having the right advisors who can help you see things from a different perspective is so critical. But what has been somewhat surprising to me is how deep those financial thoughts and practices go within each individual person, and how they are shaped by their upbringing or their era or whatever it may be. Depression era, people think differently than people who were born, 20 years later. It's just a whole different mentality. So I think the legacy planning and how important that is to people, and how to understand on the mortgage side how to cater to that, and to be able to help people understand that they can still leave a legacy even if they take a loan against their property. But the importance of the legacy is something that I not underestimated, but it's nice to see that people care about those things, that it's not just all about money, but also the intertwining of family dynamics into the loan process. And just the thoughts behind taking a loan has also been pretty eye-opening for us, where we could have a perfect solution for a family that then one of the adult children puts a veto vote in, and then it doesn't happen, even though it's clearly the right solution because of maybe their own dynamics around money and disputes with, siblings or other relatives that may be potentially going to inherit part of that property. So family dynamics and legacy are two very powerful factors.
Absolutely. Mark, thank you so much for such a great conversation and sharing all your insights today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Jerry. Thank you for having me. And yeah, hopefully we'll continue our dialogue for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So where can our audience go to learn more about your work or explore financing options for their residents?
Sure. Financial professionals in the senior space can go to a website, financingforseniors.com. That will lead you to our website as well, which is markmaimon.com, markmaimon.com. And there's all sorts of resources there. But Financing for Seniors is a great place to start. We have information for all different types of professionals, whether they be senior communities, state attorneys, tax attorneys, whatever it may be, that's specific to their needs and the types of conversations that they're having with their clients and their families. So that's a great place to find us.
All right, excellent. All right. So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to extend a huge thank you to you, Mark Maimon, for joining us and sharing how your work is empowering families and supporting senior living communities alike. Mark, your commitment to disrupting outdated systems and educating families is exactly the kind of change our industry needs. So if you want to connect with Mark or learn more about his team's lending tools, all the links are in the show notes. As always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the evolving world of senior care, covering everything from innovative care models and leadership strategies to family support technology and the future of aging. And also remember that From Lease to Leases isn't just an audio experience, we're also a video podcast. So if you want to see the video versions of our episodes like the one here with Mark, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube or Spotify channels. I'm Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. Thank you for joining us on From Leads to Leases. Please like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. I'm truly grateful for your time and attention. So until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again soon. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified, tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.